Hello, everyone. This is the upstream working group meeting for OLM. First off on our agenda, we have our milestone check-in. So we have a couple of new issues on here around introducing constraints for the solver. So would anyone like to speak to any of the items on the board?
I can provide some updates about the introduce the constraints for upgrade edges and the variable sources. Yeah, so basically what we are doing is allow an operator to be upgraded only if the desired version replaces the current version, just to make sure that that upgrade is possible. This PR, there is already a PR ongoing. I need to clean up still, so there are things that need to be fixed and clean up. But yeah, I mean, right now it's working, so pending the code review.
And that's the same for introducing variable sources for the install bundles as well, right?
Yes, it includes, that PR includes both. As in order to implement the constraints, I actually need to know the original operator information that trigger the bundle deployment in order to be able to compare what's installed right now with what the user wants to install now, well, upgrade now. So yeah.
Okay. Apart from that, oh, this is new. So we also have.
Yeah, I just realized that I didn't have that label before. So there was another issue that went in, which is we introduced the catalog metadata API, but it's behind. So it's essentially, if you remember the package API and the bundle API, bundle metadata API, we've decided to consolidate to the catalog metadata API, but for now, we've hidden that behind feature gate. So this one's just saying that the design doc talks about serving this content using an aggregated API service. So this one's going to be serving the catalog metadata API using that service. It's in progress. And when it's done, hopefully you can see the catalog metadata API being served by the aggregated service instead of CRDs.
And I suppose this is related to the reason for choosing a single API over. Oh, this was the original doc for the aggregated API service, right?
Right.
Okay. So does anyone want to speak to any of the other items on board?
Yeah, I can quickly say dependency CLI, library and CLI, there is a pull request which is waiting for code review. And yeah, it's 246. So I think it's ready for review. It's first iteration, well, not first iteration, there were a few iterations already, but it's still, I would still call it a proof of concept, but I would like to merge it so we can work, keep it up to date with all the refactorings, which will hopefully happen soon. For example, there is work ongoing and RFC is open for the way how we build DEPI problems. So I think I expect a lot of things will change in operator controller at some point. So I kept it simple, but still want to merge it so the code doesn't get rotten. And I expect to iterate on it together with the operator controller. And there is also a discussion open, which for gathering feedback for off-cluster CLI tools and their use cases. The link is both in the PR and in the issue as well. So please take a look when you have a moment.
Yes, and this is also related to the changes to DEPI itself, right?
Yes, so this one is Paris, I think, not with us today. So I think there is a RFC open on this one. We changed the approach a bit, so it's not pipelines anymore, but Per presented the new approach on, I think it was the previous community meeting. So I think we are now just like waiting for feedback on RFC as far as I know. Hopefully Per will, or maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is where we are.
All right. And I think that's all the items we have in our current milestone as of now.
I had a question, sorry, back on the upgrade constraints, upgrade edges. Is that constraint an exact match constraint, or is it like a Semver range, or what?
Joking is.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah, the constraints for upgrade edges, is that constraint represented as an exact match like the replaces is today, or is it more like the skip ranges today where it's a Semver
Right
range?
now, yeah. Right now I'm using the replaces. So just to get the PR going, but we will have to implement the skip ranges too. Yeah.
Just to add a bit of context, when we were scoping this work, we specifically called out that we'd be omitting skip range for the first iteration.
Yeah, okay. How much of this is based on trying to maintain compatibility so that existing operator bundles that define skip ranges and replaces will work with V1, and how much are we trying to define a new way of representing those edges? And I guess where I'm going with this is, I hope this is not controversial to say that the replaces, skips, and skip range API is not a pattern we want to recreate. You know, replaces in particular, the fact that replaces can only specify one prior version is a serious challenge for a lot of our operator authors. And so having a replaces defined as at least a set of things that you can replace, and then also having the ability for replaces to be defined in terms of a range, or maybe a range and Boolean logic, like it replaces A, B, and anything between F and R. You know, I think is more the kind of API we would want to see, but so I just wanted to see where, if that was the direction things were going generally or not.
Ben, that is the direction I think things should go. I think part of this was we've got a whole bunch of catalogs that already have skip replaces, skip range. So it sort of makes sense to at least build a thing that knows how to deal with those. We can probably iterate, but in my mind, we should probably try to build this upgrade edge thing such that there's maybe like, so I don't think we should necessarily build this with the same sorts of weirdness that OLM v0 has around, oh, you can't replace, like the tail of the channel has to not have replaces that doesn't exist, and you must have exactly one channel head, and there has to be a linear chain of replaces. Like, I think a lot of that we can just stop enforcing and just look at the various things that define upgrade edges and just accept whatever is there, right? So like theoretically, you could have a channel that a bundle has multiple replaces, or it has multiple channel heads. Like I sort of think like we can be a little bit more relaxed potentially. But then even beyond that, I definitely agree that just the terminology of the naming of these things is confusing and there's too many different knobs. But I think it's probably a follow-on task to define a brand new upgrade edge API, whether it's Simber or direct names or whatever, and maybe there's multiple options. And then I'd also like to see like a completely implicit upgrade edge definition where you can say like just order by Simber, and the and like on cluster the resolver knows what that means and like essentially like builds the upgrade edges internally itself to figure out what to do. And then that means that as a catalog author, you just have to keep throwing bundles into your package and cluster figures out where to insert it. So I think there's a lot more work to do here, I guess, is the short way to answer your question.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think I heard what I was hoping to hear, which is, yeah, we're doing this for now so that we can support the existing stuff, but this is not the only thing that we intend to do in this space going forward. On the catalog bit, I sort of thought what you were describing there about the implicitly generated graph was going to be handled more by the file-based catalog. I forget the latest term, but the DSLs that allow you to, yeah, the veneers, where the veneer would handle that, where, yeah, like the catalog author just shoves stuff in through that veneer and the veneer creates the edges. But we don't have to sidetrack too deep into that, I guess.
That's certainly one way to do it. Yeah, I kind of think we should potentially define like more like another channel definition in FBC that you don't even have to regenerate stuff. You just say like, here's all the bundles, you know, in my channel or not. Order them for me according to the rules defined by whatever schema we come up with, right? So what I'd really like to see is, and I did a demo of something for a few people last week or the week before, where like I pretty much just replicated RPMs, like RPM build and create repo, where it's like you just throw a bunch of bundles into a directory and you run, you know, create repo dot with the directory name, and you just end up with like a repo that has everything set up for you. And maybe that's a template, but I kind of, the way that I had set up some of this prototype code was essentially like on cluster, we just figure out what the order is based on how RPM does it essentially, right? Like every package has exactly one order and everything upgrades from the thing below it. And here's like the version schema that defines, you know, what the ordering is. So I'd like to investigate that a little bit too.
But that still implies a catalog with some sort of file-based catalog with a JSON that at least lists all those bundles, even if it doesn't indicate
Yes.
the relationship between them.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Got it.
So just to comment on this, so I think what we want to do is probably create a discussion thread to talk about the various upgrade paths. Architectures probably isn't the right way, but like how we want to, like if we have this thing installed, what is a viable upgrade? I think we should probably call out the different types of things we want to support. We have this VO upgrade skip range format. We have Semver, and there's possibly others. So maybe getting a quick discussion there just to collect feedback would be great. One other thing I think we should do is just make, focus on the fact that the existing work that Joachim has done is really just solves the problem of, hey, we have this thing installed. How can we define a, how can we consider that we have this thing installed when deciding what to install next? And so replaces, I think, is good for right now in terms of, fleshing that out and getting in front of people and honoring those edges. And what I'm trying to say is like that seems to be different than trying to figure out all the different like upgrade path types or architectures that we want to support. And then one last thing I just wanted to call out that isn't tracked here is Joe Keem's work introduces a new OLM.property or relies on a new property. So we'll have to add that to catalog D. So we'll have one more ticket that we'll need to add to do and track on this page.
I'm curious what more we need, but we can take that offline. I also just added a comment in 267. Nikita, would you mind opening that real quick? One of the things in the description talks about constraining the upgrade to something that's in the channel of what's currently installed. And the comment is basically like, I don't think we should do that. That's kind of, it's not what OLM v0 does. And I don't think it's really even, it doesn't really even make sense in certain cases. Essentially, like you should be able to upgrade to a different, like to a bundle in a different channel, as long as there's an upgrade edge that's supported from the thing that's currently installed. And the one case where it doesn't really make sense is if you think about how OLM v1 works now. If you say like operator.spec.package foo, and foo has 10 different bundles in it, you're not stating a desire or a specification for which channel you care about. You say like, doesn't matter, like it can be any channel. So it seems odd for us to then say like, well, we just so happened that our resolution picked one in the v1 channel, and so therefore any future updates have to come from v1 when you never even asked for v1 in the first place. So I think we should not care about upgrades in the same channel. What we should do is say like, if the user has stated a desire for a specific channel in their operator, then we should honor that when we do the upgrade. But we shouldn't be looking at the channel of the installed bundle, which I don't think you can even really know, given my existing example. Does that make sense? I put a comment like this. I think Varsha had a PR open that was somewhat related. I put a much longer comment in as well. I can try to find that and link it here.
Wu, you had something to say?
Yes, I tried. I'm hoping I'm not dragging this meeting any longer, but just respond to what Joe said. Is the current OLM v0 does support you to switching channel. That's not a problem there, but there's a limitation on how you can upgrade that, like replace and skip won't be supported for switching channel. It requires skip ran to do that. That's the current behavior. So what you said is partially correct, not entirely correct there. The problem, I agree with you, understand that sometimes upgrade doesn't need to be restricted to the channel, but however, the concept of channel is allow the author to put things in order and put things in the channel for a reason, because they want it to be that way. And if you're saying that you don't appreciate or respect the channel setting that they have, then you're defeating a purpose of having a channel in the first place. So that's why I feel like this requires a little bit further discussion in the sense of like how upgrade process relevant to the channel construction and what's going to be the acceptable behavior of that kind of thing, because you need to respect the catalog, which is where the channel is.
So Vu, I think in v1, the way that things work now is channel is a optional thing for you to specify in the operator spec. So as a cluster admin or a person creating an operator, you can say, I want only stuff that's in this channel. And so like what you're saying, you can do that still. But now there's more flexibility where you can also not specify a channel, in which case anything can happen as long as there's an upgrade edge.
Yes, that sounds like what we should that should be a behavior that I expect to be. But at the same time, when you construct, the operator and then attach certain property into it, and then that impact the subsequent upgrade, then that is up to the system, I mean the OM, to take care of that. Like if you're ignoring the channel concept from that point on because they didn't specify the channel in the first place, and you can continue going that. But if you decided to attach a channel to whatever that is, then you need to respect that moving forward. That's my point. So if that's what V1 is doing, then I have no problem with that.
I think the distinction is did the user provide a channel constraint or not? If the user provided a channel constraint on the operator, then that will be respected. If the user didn't, and they just happened to get an operator from the V1 channel, there's no reason to ensure that future upgrades only come from the V1 channel. I think that's what Joe's saying.
Yeah, and there's a third thing, which is if at time 0, I said I wanted channel V1, and that worked, and I got a bundle installed from that channel. And then later I say, no, I actually want channel V2 now. As long as there's an upgrade edge between what's currently installed from that V1 channel into a bundle that in the V2 channel that says it upgrades from that V1 bundle, that should also work.
So, Joe, I have a question for you. Probably late to the party, but I just want to make sure that I'm on the same page. I know at some point you'd introduce this idea of what if we didn't care about channels at all in V1, or at least you pose that question of, is channel an important enough construct that we need to bring it over to V1? Did we reach any conclusion about that? Did we, it seems like we're already talking about channels in terms of like, okay, it's optional, it can be there, but is it documented somewhere the value of channels, or is it documented like a channel is an important construct that users do use and want to see it continue forward in V1?
Yeah, I think it's still a requirement. I guess what I'm saying is I don't think it should be the only option. Like, I think there's like this, at least a lesson learned for me, which is OLM V0 is very much tilted toward operator authors having more of the control. And there's a lot of guardrails that essentially prevent cluster admins from making their will work. And so in OLM V1, I think we should tilt the scales back a little bit. We still give operator authors the ability to define channels and to define the guardrails, but operator or cluster admins should be able to say like, well, I don't care about the channel concept. All I care about is that I'm staying on the upgrade edges that are defined somewhere. Or even, I don't even care about the upgrade edges. Here's another knob that lets me just ignore upgrade edges, and I'm going to tell you to just go do exactly what I say. So I mean, obviously, like we're mixing concepts there when I bring that up, but I think that's sort of the mindset I have is like, let's give cluster admins more control over how OLM does its resolution and what gets picked and that kind of stuff. But I think channel is still an important concept that a lot of cluster admins want, right? Because like the operator authors are the ones that really know whether they're able to support something at a certain level or whether something is stable and has, proven to be usable and that kind of thing. So the channel concept is still valuable to cluster admins. I guess my point is like, it's not the only thing that's valuable to cluster admins, so let's not force them to use channels.
So I wanted to, this is a really valuable discussion, and I think it might, this feels like it's not something that we can get to a conclusion here. So would it be better for us to start a GitHub discussion around this, because it seems like we have quite a few considerations to take in here. And the same for the upgrade edge design for skips replaces skip range, that too. So I think those two are really good candidates for discussion that could spin out work.
Yeah, sounds good. And we can either have that discussion just right there on that issue, or if we need a bigger discussion to talk about bigger ideas, we can make a new discussion in the operator controller repo. Thanks, and
I don't know that we want to connect it to that issue. That's in that issue is in the milestone, right?
Yeah,
Well, I do we want to keep it? It seems like a discussion would allow us to consider all the types of upgrade user experiences that we want to.
yeah, Alex, I was mainly talking about the comment that I made specifically about what was listed in the issue. If we want to have other aspects of it, yeah, I agree. We wouldn't want to do it there.
Okay.
right. So I think that's mostly it for the current status of our milestone 5. So going on to the rest of our agenda, there is well, I don't think Per is in today, so we might have to skip on Ripley unless someone else wants to talk to this.
I don't have anything to say to this. I don't know it well enough to speak to it. We should probably move this the next week.
That makes sense. Then we have the starting CSV issue that Chris Johnson brought up.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
So it looks like Joe called me out in the Slack on this one. Yeah, I found another dragon, I guess as somebody else put it. So yeah, we're trying to use, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this because I think there is some healthy discussion going on in Slack. But I just wanted to make sure that this wasn't something simple or this is hiding some other kind of behavior or understanding of how I thought this all worked. So what's ultimately happening is that we have essentially some cluster scoped operators, for example, cert manager. And we have described OLM dependencies on those things. And we're also moving away from full catalogs. We used to use replaces to make sure that the old bundles remained in the catalog because we didn't know who might need to install those older versions using a starting CSV or a dependency constraint. So we left them all in there, but then of course that bloated air gap, right? So air gap had to copy all those images over. So now we're using sparse catalogs. So we're just including latest channels and latest channel heads in there. So what this is showing is that when we have like a cert manager operator installed in all namespaces mode, and we have another operator expressing a dependency on cert manager, and we install that into an own namespace with that own namespace operator group. What happens is the dependent operator gets installed just fine and resolves to the cert manager operator, which has already been installed in all namespaces mode. But if I update the catalog and the one of the CSV or the bundle for the cert manager operator, for example, is removed from that catalog and is upgraded, then the own namespace ends up becoming stuck because the starting CSV in the auto-generated subscription in the child namespace or the own namespace doesn't get updated, or it gets orphaned somehow. So the starting CSV is somehow getting looked at in upgrade scenarios, which seems odd to me. So I just wanted to call that out. I think Ben Luddy was interested quite a bit in this. He's asking a lot of questions, and I clarified a lot in there. So I just wanted to make sure that, so our workaround is in the child namespace, which I call T1 here. There's the, when I install an operator in T1, I call it B B has a reference to C, which is cert manager. The in order for me to get B to upgrade, then I have to update the subscription for C, which is one of those automatically generated subscriptions in T1. I have to basically remove the starting CSV from there, which gets injected automatically when I provision an operator or when I create a subscription, at least to the console and the OpenShift console. And then if that starting CSV is in there, then it says, oh, I need the starting CSV to be in the catalog. Otherwise, I don't know how to resolve it. So somehow the starting CSV has now been orphaned and it doesn't exist anymore, and it's blocking the upgrade from B, even though C has already been upgraded. So I don't know if we need to take a whole lot of time on this, but I wanted to call it out as kind of an odd scenario. I mean, we have a workaround, but it's not, it's another one of those edge case workarounds that we have to deal with. And this is going to proliferate more for us as we start adopting sparse catalogs more and more often. So our workaround is either to stop using OLM dependencies altogether and just force customers to install stuff independently. Force people to, of course, OLM v1 doesn't have this problem because it's simplified the tenancy model, at least to start with, which we still need to resolve. But my workarounds are either to do that or to have the customer manually edit this automatically generated subscription and remove or change the starting CSV to something that's there. I was hoping somebody would just go, oh yeah, I've got this code that does this and we probably should remove that, or that this is an accident, or.
Wu, you had something to say?
Yes. Regarding to what Chris just say. Hey Chris, long time no see. Just so you know.
Yep.
Yeah. Just a question. I actually need to see the log on this to actually see what's happening here. Because there's a few things. I'm pretty sure Benry asked a few. I don't know where that is. Probably on Slack. I didn't pay attention. But first of all, I don't actually quite remember that we need to add starting CSV on the automatically created subscription. Basically the dependent one. I don't recall we actually do that. Maybe I'm just not remember.
Yeah, I didn't do it. So it could be the OpenShift. I created this to the OpenShift console, but I didn't create the dependency. So the automatic subscription, I didn't create that. And the console probably didn't create that.
Yeah,
so
that would be the
resolver
that. Doing that, but it doesn't need the starting CSV for that because we already know what version that is based from the resolver. So it doesn't need to do that. So I'm not sure why doing that. Maybe it didn't or something went wrong. I don't remember. I need to look at the code to know what exactly that was. But also I'm at the same time, I'm not entirely sure this is a resolver problem. If it is, then obviously this is the box. But if the reason for that is because we don't care about starting CSV after the initial installation that you mentioned a bit earlier, Chris, that is irrelevant after that point. So it should not blocking anything to begin with.
Yeah, it's supposed to be irrelevant. Yes.
Yeah. So if that is the case, and that's a bug. That's secondly, basing on what you're describing here on the issue, the reason why I'm not entirely sure is a resolve issue, the fact that you're testing on the OpenShift marketplace namespace specifically, and then you upgrade the catalog on the same namespace. But on your T1 namespace, a different namespace, right? So there's a slightly weird problem on the OLM v1 v0 sometime that is having a like a delay upgrade on some namespace, because that namespace doesn't get upgraded frequently, or there's nothing going on that namespace, it doesn't actually get triggered, and this can last for a long time. I'm pretty sure we did fix that, but some older version of it actually doesn't get fixed. So when you're removing the starting CSV, it actually triggered the upgrade process, even though it should happen later on eventually. So that's why I want you. So
you're suggesting maybe you're suggesting maybe I touch something else.
Yes, exactly. So I want to say that I want you to test it, just add an annotation or label, whatever you can come up with on the subscription to see if it actually trigger the same behavior without removing the starting CSV. Because if that also work, meaning it's nothing to do with the starting CSV, it's actually a delay problem that we have. And Kevin said that on the chat on Slack, on Zoom here, that there's a 15-minute delay during to the frequency of we sync the channel, basically. I'm sorry, sync the namespace. we fixed it. I'm the one who was fixing it. I was the one fixed it. So it should work on a newer version of OM, but I'm just, maybe there's some, legacy stuff that we don't know about. But I want you to test it again using that, Chris, if you don't mind, and see if that worked out or not. If it doesn't, then this is a real box.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. Is there anything else you want me to look at? I think Ben also had some thoughts that maybe there's a race condition having to do with the CSV copier. Maybe it's
probably that's one possibility, but at the same time collecting the log. I want to see the log from the catalog operator. If you can post it up, that would be nice. And also, now you're getting it, just get the whole thing, get the OM.
Okay, so the catalog
log as well to get them both in the same namespace anyway, right? So may as well get it. And then we can look into the log. It's gonna be a bit more helpful there, even though you probably need to enable debugging mode on them
I
both.
know how to do that.
Yes,
Yep, that's fine.
We can help. I'm sure the team can help you further. Basically, that's my point. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you, Chris.
Okay. Moving on to our next item. That is
Yeah.
oh,
So-
sorry.
Yeah, so this is, we've been talking about the documentation or starting the documentation for V1. We've had experience of documentation in V0. And a lot of the documentation in V0 was post or in retrospective of the product already existing for a while. So it feels like a good opportunity for V1 to start off with the docs in the right foot starting now. So we've been talking about having a doc strategy for V1. Essentially, if you look at the RFC, it just talks about, let me start from where it started from. If you look at operatorframework.io, the website hasn't been updated for a while. It just talks about the SDK documentation and the OLM v0 documentation, but there's nothing about the OLM v1 documentation. So I think the RFC talks about starting us off with the documentation strategy for V1, but also how we can make sure that we as engineers, along with the docs team, are constantly writing docs for V1 and making them available for consumption as a documentation site. So for example, what we've worked on, or the PR that you see, is essentially taking the docs folder that every project has, and so does ours, and giving it a life as a doc site. So essentially, this PR is for publishing it using GitHub pages, uses a theme and stuff that's just the docs theme, standard themes that are used for other doc sites. We've just given the docs folder a life, in a way that once the structure is in place, all the engineers can start contributing docs to the docs folder, and they show up in the docs side. So Ankita, if you can just open up that link that's mentioned in the agenda. Yeah, so if you click on the prototype link.
This one, right?
Yeah. So yeah, this is the build of that same PR, but from my main branch, from the main branch of my fork. Essentially, once the PR merges and we enable GitHub pages for operator controller repo, this is what the doc site will look like. We've also been talking, this is just for the operator controller, but I think we've also been talking about the overall doc strategy for OLM v1. So that includes file-based catalogs and catalog D and OPM required for file-based catalogs. That RFC hasn't been written yet, but we'll eventually get there. We just wanted to get this prototype and this RFC out, see what the feedback is, get this PR merged, get the documentation for operator controller started, and keep the overall doc strategy for V1 as to do. are coming soon. Michael's been working with us on this, who's from the OpenShift docs team. I don't know, Michael, if you want to add anything more.
Yeah, this is, I think the idea behind this is it's laid out in the RFC, but like as we're kind of iterating right now, and you know, by using like a GitHub Pages site in these repos, we can, you know, that often sort of signals that this is sort of a work in progress. We can put a little disclaimer on these doc sites that say, you know, don't use this in a production environment yet. But it's a way for contributors and engineers, and like when you're working on stuff, to just create documentation quickly, and then we can work on you know, other people like myself on the documentation team can work on sort of refining that, and we can keep iterating before developing great docs in the project stage, I guess is like something I say, so that we can all do better and iterate once we get to the product stage of the life cycle of the product, and that we can hopefully expand you know, people who are looking to contribute or who want to try things, and maybe sort of have more community involvement as well. And these GitHub Pages templates, they also, we could there's been some talk about potentially creating a blog if we do like a consolidated, like say GitHub Pages or like operator framework.githubpages.io, like that's pulling all the projects together. Like if there's a central site for that, well, we could also have a blog post where we could say host community meetings. An Onyx example of the releases, he already has a link to a demo, but we could have calls for action for the community. We could do recaps of, so there's a potential for outreach and a way to just kind of iterate on the work that we're doing and kind of show it to the world.
Well, thank you, Michael. This looks fantastic. And I think it is definitely worth following up on.
Yeah, I think the next step then is to go and review the PR and get that merged. But yeah, the review the PR process is the first. So I think the PR link is there. If we can have some eyes on that, that'd be great.
And
is this something that we want to have as an issue to track the progress of, or is this something that we want to do but not as part of any milestone?
I'm open either way. I can create an issue if you feel like that'll help us get more traction for reviews. I'm also happy to not create an issue and just I'm open either way. I can just create an issue to start us off with.
Okay, I think that's all the topics that we have. And next on our agenda is the ideation for the next milestone. As of now, we have no issues here, but I think as part of our discussion, we did come across at least two things that we want to create discussions for. One is around the upgrade edge design that we want to follow, and another is around channels and what level of support we want around that. So that might be interesting to add in over the course of this week.
Ankita, I added the under ideas, under the idea category, I think, or yeah, OMB1 upgrade UXs. So that's the one that discussion is to track the what Joe typed a whole bunch when easily. So Joe, how did you type all this? Okay, well, so this this discussion was created to kind of drive the earlier discussion we were having about the supported upgrade UXs that we wanted to support. So that's one we should probably jump on at some point.
Yeah, that's yeah, I have the same question as Alex. Like,
Oh,
that's a lot of stuff to try.
Yeah, he copy pasted. Okay, that makes way more sense. I was like, holy moly.
Yeah, so this is certainly something that we want to iterate on over the next week. And going on to our old action items checkpoint. Okay, there was the multi-tenant cluster discussion that we had going on. And I don't think there was all that much of an update on this after 2 weeks ago. So is the anything that we want to add to this?
Yeah, I've had it open in my in a tab for a while now, thinking that I'll be reviewing it and adding it. So I think, but haven't gotten the time for it yet. Maybe we'll have to give it a little bit more time before we see more views and discussions around this. Essentially, it's an item in the backlog for now, I think.
Yeah, in that case, I think it makes sense to pull this to next week so we can check in and see if there's any more that we can add to this. And I think that is all we have to get through. So I will be creating the next meetings, copying this for next week's agenda. And I wanted to ask if anyone wanted to host next week's working group meeting.
I'll do it.
Oh,
So
thanks,
next
Andy.
week, I think Tuesday is a holiday in the US.
It is.
So, I
So
think yeah.
So it'll be probably the week after.
I volunteer for next week. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, the next one I'll go for it.
All right, and I think that's all we have to cover for the working group meeting today, unless there was anything that isn't in the agenda that someone wanted to bring up. Okay, I suppose that's everything that we have for today. Thank you all for joining and have a great day.
Thank you.
Peter.